He was charming, clever, and seemingly perfect, a man who could make anyone trust him. But beneath that polished exterior lurked a cold, calculating killer, a master of deception whose next move would shock the world. When a body was dredged, from the Devon coast, it set off a chain of events that would unravel decades of lies, false identities, and an international web of crime, bringing Albert Johnson Walker face to face with justice. The morning was cold, damp, and quiet. Mist clung to the water like a pale veil, muffling the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull of the small fishing boat. It was 5 a.m., and the fishermen, Paul and Mark, had already been awake for hours, preparing their nets, checking the engine, and ensuring their gear was ready for the day. The harbour at Brixham, Devon, was almost empty at this hour, save for a few early risers preparing to venture out into the foggy waters of the English Channel. Seagulls called overhead, their cries echoing off the moored boats and the stone quays. The smell of salt, diesel, and wet rope filled the air, mixing with the faint aroma of morning coffee from a nearby cafe that had already opened its doors. Paul, the older of the two men, a weathered figure with leathery skin etched by years of sun and wind, squinted across the grey water. "Bit quiet today," he muttered, tugging on a woolen cap. "Haven't seen a school of mackerel in weeks." Mark, younger but just as experienced, adjusted the net over the side. "Maybe the roughs will be better. 6 miles out." "Nobody goes there much. Could be worth the trip." The two men had been fishing these waters for decades. They knew the geyser tides, the hidden rocks, and the deep channels. But the area they were heading to, the roughs, was rarely fished due to its unpredictability. It was said that strange things occasionally washed ashore there, and seasoned sailors often avoided it. With a nod to each other, they set the engine to low and began the slow crawl out to open water. The sun had barely begun to push through, the morning haze casting a dim, silvery light on the rolling waves. The nets, heavy and damp, were dropped carefully into the water, weighted to sink to the seabed. They would capture everything floating above them, from fish to debris, though they never expected anything extraordinary. An hour into their work, as the nets began their slow, laborious ascent, Paul noticed something unusual. "Mark, wait, what's that?" His voice was low, almost disbelieving. Mark leaned over the rail and saw it too. At first, it appeared as just another tangled mass of seaweed and debris, but as the net rose further, a human form became unmistakable. The man's body fell out of the net, slick and pale against the wet deck. Paul staggered back, his heart pounding. "Call the Coast Guard," he said, fumbling for the radio. This isn't right." Mark, pale and shaking, added, He's dressed. Shoes, trousers, shirt, no ID." By the time the Brixham Coast Guard arrived, the fishermen were still in a state of disbelief. The body, although in the water, was remarkably well preserved. There was a deep gash on the head, likely caused during the net retrieval, but there were no obvious signs of decomposition, suggesting he had been in the water only a short time. The Devon and Cornwall police arrived shortly after the Coast Guard. Detective Sergeant Peter Redman and his colleagues were cautious yet professional, examining the scene meticulously. The first step was a thorough inspection of the body. The man wore a long-sleeve shirt, trousers, and brown shoes. His pockets were empty, turned out as if searched prior to discovery. On his wrist, a Rolex watch glimmered, its hands frozen at a time and date. The 22nd of July. Redman examined the body carefully. "Could be an accident," he murmured to his colleague. "Fell off a boat, maybe going up the channel. Plenty of vessels out there. No missing persons reported yet, though." But certain details gave him pause. The condition of the body, the gash on the head, and an unusual tattoo on the back of the right hand. It appeared to be a cluster of stars, though smudged over time. The only solid clue, however, was the Rolex watch. By chance, an officer mentioned the serial number on the Rolex to another colleague. They contacted Rolex in London, who confirmed that the watch had been serviced in Yorkshire. The records listed a Ronald Joseph Platt as the owner. This was the first real lead. Tracking Ronald Platt's last known addresses led them to Chelmsford, Essex. A landlord connected the police to a Mr. David Davis, whom Platt had listed as a personal reference. When D.S. Redman called Davis, he seemed polite but strangely unconcerned about Platt's death. Several days later, Davis sent a photograph of Platt, with the tattoo clearly visible. For a time, police believed the investigation was complete. Ronald Platt had likely drowned, an unfortunate accident. A breakthrough occurred by pure chance. D.S. Redman was sent to Davis's address and mistakenly knocked on the wrong house. The elderly couple who answered informed him that David Davis was actually living next door as Ronald Platt. Redman immediately realized the gravity of the situation. "There's foul play," he noted. "This man is hiding something. Someone's been living a double life." Investigators traced Davis's movements and possessions. They discovered the anchor from Platt's body, which had been sold at a car boot sale and recovered. While seemingly minor, this anchor would later become a key piece of evidence in linking the death to Davis. With this new information, police focused on uncovering Davis's, or rather, Walker's, activities. The next steps involved meticulously retracing his movements, possessions, and interactions with Platt's family and friends. A search of the farmhouse revealed small but significant clues. A photograph of the couple, Davis and his supposed wife, stood on the mantelpiece. But closer inspection showed inconsistencies. The woman was much younger than he appeared, and her demeanor was oddly deferential. Officers noted the pattern: a man maintaining an elaborate facade, controlling appearances carefully, and projecting trustworthiness. During the searches, investigators recovered an anchor from a car boot sale, sold by someone who had been given it earlier. Its significance wasn't immediately clear, but as the case developed, this innocuous object would become a vital piece of forensic evidence. Elaine Boyce and Ron Platt's background. To understand the deception, police spoke with Elaine Boyce, Ronald Platt's former partner. Her recollections were detailed and poignant. Elaine described meeting David Davis in 1991 at a fine art auction house in Harrogate, where she worked as a receptionist. The man had been tall, broad, and charming, almost overwhelmingly so. He just walked in and started talking about paintings, antiques, life. It felt effortless, she recalled. Within minutes, we were discussing business opportunities. I knew there was something unusual about him, but he was persuasive. He offered Ron and me positions in his company, Cavendish Corporation. It sounded so grand, so legitimate. Davis, or Walker, had a gift for making people trust him. He offered financial support, promised opportunities abroad, and presented a life of sophistication and wealth. Elaine remembered the subtle way he drew them into his orbit: generous, attentive, and disarmingly sincere. The anchor from Platt's body became a pivotal clue. Police traced its path from the fishing net to a car boot sale, where it had been, nearly sold. Its condition, markings, and alignment with Platt's injuries established a tangible connection between the deceased and the man living as Davis. Investigators also reviewed Platt's past connections, including his ex-girlfriend, Elaine, and financial dealings in France. They discovered the full scope of Walker's manipulations: false business dealings, emigration schemes, and calculated moves to isolate and control those around him. A significant breakthrough came when police discovered photographs of Walker aboard his yacht, the Lady Jane. The images suggested that the vessel had been used in close proximity to Platt's death. Investigators scoured maritime records, tracing the yacht to a dry dock in Midland. The yacht was transported to the Forensic Science Service for thorough examination. Inside, forensic experts found traces of Ronald Platt's blood and hair on cushions in the cabin. An empty shopping bag from Sport Noti, where an anchor had been purchased, was also recovered. Fingerprints on the bag matched Platt's. These findings linked the yacht directly to the victim and suggested premeditation. The anchor had been selected to secure Platt's body, consistent with injuries observed post-mortem. Dr. Helen Carr, the pathologist, emphasized the significance. One can see the positioning of the injuries on Platt's legs, she explained. Combined with the anchor, it aligns perfectly with the scenario that he was rendered unconscious, secured to the anchor, and disposed of at sea. It's a chillingly calculated method. The anchor became one of the most important pieces of evidence, traced from the fishing net to a car boot sale. Its forensic properties, zinc deposits, weight, and dimensions matched injuries found on Platt's body. Investigators concluded that it was the same anchor used to weigh him down before. Being thrown overboard, the discovery emphasized Walker's meticulousness. He had planned the disposal of Platt's body to reduce detection risk. The use of a common yet traceable anchor demonstrated both careful preparation and subtle oversight. Had the anchor been destroyed or sold successfully, police would have lacked a crucial link. Advances in technology provided another breakthrough. The yacht's global positioning system, GPS, had recorded its journey, and forensic experts were able to retrieve data from the onboard memory. Analysis showed that on the critical dates, July 20th and 21st, 1996, the yacht had been in waters, not far from where Platt's body was dredged up. Detective Redman explained the significance. This isn't just circumstantial. The GPS data places Walker in the exact location and time frame necessary for the crime. Combined with the anchor and blood evidence, it's a compelling chain, linking him to Platt's death. Walker's careful planning had included navigation and timing, yet he had overlooked digital footprints. Even the most meticulous criminal can leave traces in the modern world, and this oversight was pivotal. A crucial turning point occurred when Walker's fingerprints were sent to Interpol. Canadian authorities immediately confirmed his identity as Albert Johnson Walker, a fugitive wanted for the theft of millions of dollars. He had previously lived in Ontario with his wife, Barb, and their daughter, Sheena. Walker's history was extensive. In December 1990, he had fled Canada with $3.2 million of client funds. He had abandoned his family under the guise of a vacation, disappearing without explanation. Over the years, he had assumed multiple identities to evade capture, including David Davis in the UK. Interpol's confirmation provided the police with both motivation and context. Walker was not just a murderer. He was a career criminal capable of sophisticated deception and international evasion. Detectives began interviewing everyone connected to Walker. Key witnesses included Elaine Boyce, former partner of the Reels, Ronald Platt, who described Walker's manipulations, his charm, and the emigration scheme to Canada. Neighbors in Devon and Essex, noting discrepancies in behavior, age differences, and overly controlled appearances. Shop staff at Sport Noti, confirming the purchase of anchors and related items. Elaine's testimony was particularly revealing. She described Walker's ability to draw people in, his meticulous creation of trust, and his subtle coercion. She emphasized that he manipulated emotions and perceptions to isolate others and maintain control. Redman observed, "We realized that every interaction, every gesture had been calculated. He was a man who lived entirely in the service of deception." Forensics. Evidence allowed police to reconstruct the likely sequence of events. Walker lured Platt onto the Lady Jane, under the guise of a friendly outing. He rendered Platt unconscious, possibly striking him on the head. Platt was secured with an anchor and thrown overboard. GPS data and the frozen Rolex allowed police to pinpoint the date of the incident. July 20th, 1996, the body remained undiscovered until dredged by fishermen days later. Each piece of evidence, physical, digital, and testimonial, converged to form a cohesive narrative. Planning the arrest by late 1996, police had amassed substantial evidence linking David Davis, later revealed as Albert Johnson Walker, to the murder of Ronald Platt. Despite the wealth of forensic and testimonial evidence, Walker remained highly dangerous, charismatic, manipulative, and capable of evading law enforcement. The arrest plan required meticulous strategy. Officers were aware of his potential for resistance, the presence of firearms, and the fact that he had previously evaded international authorities. The operation would require armed officers on standby surveillance to confirm his presence at Little London, farmhouse backup teams ready to secure the premises and arrest any accomplices. Detectives hoped to catch him in a routine moment, minimizing risk to the public and themselves. On the morning of the operation, a taxi pulled up in front of Little London farmhouse. Walker, calm and composed as ever, sat in the front seat. A plainclothes officer followed at a discreet distance, observing. As the taxi proceeded toward Chelmsford, police vehicles moved into position. Armed officers blocked the path, emerging with weapons drawn. Walker was told to exit the vehicle. He complied quietly, showing no aggression, no panic. Detective Sergeant Redman recalled, "He didn't resist. He put his hands behind his back. When instructed, it was almost surreal, given the complexity of his crimes. He remained composed, even charming, as if nothing were amiss." Walker was handcuffed and transported to Chum's police station. Upon search, officers discovered a startling detail. One pocket contained identification as David Davis, the other as Ronald Platt. This confirmed his use of multiple identities and provided tangible proof of the deception central to the investigation. The arrest was only the beginning. Officers conducted a thorough search of Walker's Essex properties, uncovering $25,000 in cash, $8,000, Swiss francs 17 gold bars, valuable paintings, photographs of Walker aboard the Lady Jane documents, linking him to his false identities. Each item reinforced the investigation, demonstrating financial fraud, identity theft, and connections to Platt's murder. Investigators carefully catalogued every object, aware that these would form critical evidence in court. Parallel to the physical search, police gathered extensive witness statements. Elaine Boyce recounted Walker's manipulation of herself and Ron, his emigration schemes, and the timeline leading up to Platt's death. Neighbors described unusual behavior, age discrepancies, and patterns that suggested deception. Shop staff confirmed Walker's purchase of the anchor, a key link to the disposal of Platt's body. Investigators also conducted thorough background checks, uncovering Walker's previous criminal history. In Canada, his use of aliases and connections to international fraud. The Lady Jane, transported to the forensic service, yielded more evidence. Blood and hair from Platt on cushions, fingerprints on the sport noti bag, alignment of anchor marks with Platt's injuries. The combination of physical and forensic evidence allowed investigators to reconstruct the murder with precision. The GPS data from the yacht placed Walker in the exact location and time of Platt's death, strengthening the timeline. Sheena, Walker's daughter, became a crucial witness. Though she had lived under her father's manipulations for years, her testimony clarified key points. She confirmed her father's presence on the boat on the day of the murder. She described the family's movements, providing insight into Walker's opportunity to commit the crime. Her observations highlighted the isolation and control Walker exercised over those around him. while she had been unknowingly complicit as part of his facade. Her testimony ultimately provided the jury with a window into Walker's behavior and movements on the day of the murder. Criminal psychologists assessed Walker's behavior during arrest and interviews. They noted high intelligence and strategic thinking, manipulative tendencies, lack of remorse or empathy for victims, ability to charm, disarm, and deceive individuals and authorities. These assessments were crucial for both the prosecution and the defense, illustrating the calculated nature of Walker's actions and his capacity for premeditated murder. With Walker in custody and evidence secured, the next phase was trial preparation. Prosecutors meticulously reviewed witness statements, forensic reports, GPS data from the Lady Jane financial records, testimonies from international authorities regarding Walker's fugitive status legal teams rehearsed the narrative, ensuring a coherent presentation of Walker's deception, identity theft, and murder. Witnesses like Elaine Boyce and Sheena were prepared to testify about Walker's manipulations and movements. The prosecution focused on constructing a chronological chain of evidence. Walker's false identities and manipulation of Platt, the events leading to Platt's death, physical and forensic evidence linking Walker to the yacht, and the murder financial and material evidence demonstrating ongoing deception, witness testimony corroborating the timeline, and Walker's behavior. By connecting each piece, the prosecution aimed to prove that Walker had not only the motive, but the opportunity and premeditation necessary for murder. In June 1998, Albert Johnson Walker, posing as David Davis, stood trial at Exeter Crown Court for the murder of Ronald Platt, facing overwhelming evidence that spanned international borders and years of deception. The prosecution meticulously presented forensic evidence, including Platt's blood and hair on Walker's yacht, fingerprints on a bag used to transport the anchor that caused Platt's death, GPS data placing the yacht near the body's disposal site, and the Rolex watch that pinpointed the time of death. Witnesses, including Platt's ex-girlfriend Elaine Boyce and Walker's daughter Sheena, testified to Walker's manipulative behavior, premeditated planning, and control over those around him, showing he had both motive and opportunity. Despite Walker's calm, charming demeanor on the stand and his claims that Platt's death was accidental, cross-examination exposed inconsistencies and the impossibility of his narrative, while psychological experts highlighted his calculated, remorseless nature. Within just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty, and Walker was sentenced to life imprisonment, bringing an end to the chilling saga of a master manipulator whose crimes nearly went undetected but were ultimately unraveled through careful investigation, forensic science, and courageous testimony.